Today we're going to focus on how to solve absolute value inequalities. Just a quick review. Absolute value is the symbol that's used right here, and that means the absolute value of x. And there's going to be two solutions. Whenever we get rid of absolute value symbols, we've got to go ahead and take care of the one that is pretty obvious, and then there's the one that's not quite as obvious. As if x is -3, then the absolute value of -3 is going to be equal to 3, and if x is 3, then the absolute value of 3 is 3 also. So that's why those work. So let's move on to talk about absolute value inequalities. So let's say that we have the following absolute value inequality. If we have something that looks like this, x, the absolute value of x is greater than, let's see here, 3. Okay, we're still going to make this into two separate inequalities. That's one of the rules when you're working with absolute values. So the first one is the really obvious one. X is greater than 3. The second one is a little bit less obvious, but x is going to be flip the inequality symbol and change the sign of the value as well. So I know that looks a little bit complicated. All it is flip the direction of the inequality symbol and then change the sign from, in this case, from positive to negative. So when we write this out, it's going to look like this. So x is greater than 3. So it's going to be greater than 3. So 4 is a solution, so that works. Or x is less than -3. Remember the non-filled in circles. So absolute value inequalities look very similar to compound inequalities that we just worked on before. So new one here, a little bit more complicated, but still the same rules apply. This is the absolute value of the quantity x plus 2 is less than 3. So again, we have to break this up into two separate absolute value, or two separate inequalities. So this is going to be x plus 2 is less than 3. It's the straightforward one. And then we have the other one, which is going to be x plus 2. Change the direction of the inequality symbol and change the sign of what it's equal to. So now we go ahead and we just solve these the way we normally would solve these. So this is going to be subtract 2. We left with x is less than 1. And over here we're going to subtract 2. So here for this red one, x is less than 1. So again, non-filled in circle. It's going to be pointing in this direction, x is less than 1. For the blue one, x is greater than -5. So x is greater than -5. And the part that works is the part that's in the middle that meets both of the conditions. So the part that works is going to be actually if I erase this extra piece here, this extra piece here. In this case here, this chunk in the middle is just going to show me that x is going to be greater than -5 and less than 1. So really it's just going to, if we wanted to write it out the more traditional way, it would be just like this. Just like that. It's the same thing. Remember to color in your dots if it's less than or equal to. So now we're going to just review how to solve this complicated absolute value inequality, but we're not going to graph it in the end. So if you have this set up, remember you have to do everything on the outside of the inequality symbols before you break it apart. So this is 2 times the absolute value of the quantity 3w plus 8 minus 13 is less than -5. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add 13 both sides. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to divide both sides by 2. So now we can break this part into our two separate absolute value inequalities. We can break the absolute value inequality into two separate inequalities. Excuse me. So here, this first of all, it's going to be 3w plus 8 is less than 4. That's the first one. The second one I'm going to put over here. It's going to be 3w plus 8 is greater than negative 4. And when we solve these, we're going to subtract 8 from both sides and then divide by 3. So the answer to this blue one is w is greater than negative 4. And the answer to this red one is w is less than 4/3. And since w is greater than 4 and less than 4/3, it's going to be one of those ones that looks like this, with the part in the middle. So absolute deviation is something that's also covered in this section. And absolute deviation is the amount something can vary from a set point. So this says the absolute deviation of x from 9 is less than 10. Okay, so let's think about what that means. The absolute variation of x from 9 is 10. What that means is, since it says from 9, we're going to start off with 9 minus x, because that's going to be the deviation, the amount of change from one to the other, is less than, so the absolute value is less than 10. Okay, so now we've got it set up, we can just solve it. First of all, we set up our two inequalities. We subtract 9 from both sides. Now we've got to multiply both sides by -1, so don't forget to flip the inequality symbol.